Hello and welcome to the Untranslatable Travel Tip Series. Today we are focusing on one of our favorite cities in Germany, the Hauptstadt or capital of Germany, which is Berlin. And we have a lot of exciting tips, tricks, and things to watch out for in Berlin coming your way this travel series. And I have to say I'm very excited to discuss this one because one of my favorite travel companions was fortunate enough to accompany me in Berlin, and we got to explore a lot of great places that we'll be talking about today. And that travel buddy, of course, is my pal, my Bruder, my friend Jared. What's going on, Jared?
You betcha. No better way to experience the city for the first time than with Chad as your tour guide. You did a great job.
Thanks,
and
buddy.
Because of it, we have a bunch to talk about today. But first, please, everyone,
Spread a little love.
and follow us on Instagram, Untranslatable Podcast. When this episode comes out, well, you're already listening to it, so it's out. There are plenty of great Berlin pictures to scroll back through and see. And also, I'm sure we have posted some new ones at this point as well, so check those out. Twitter, Untranslatable1, the number 1. You can see, click there to get some links. I post the YouTube, Stitcher, and iTunes link there, but also we're on wherever you can find podcasts, whatever you're into. Also, songs of the pod for when we do that, but this is the travel tips, so no song of the pod today. Or email us, untranslatablepodcast@gmail.com. At any of these places, the Instagram, Twitter, email, hit us up. Let us know what cities you'd like us to talk about. And if you've been to those cities, give us some recommendations that we should definitely be mentioning if we're talking about these cities. And of course, because the Untranslatable Podcast is the greatest podcast on earth, my soundboard froze for a second. Spread a little love with some
Spread a little love.
some 5-star reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. Thank you. Okay, well, let's keep going. How dare you, soundboard?
Right.
Um,
That's
I'm
right. I
excited
can
to
be
talk
your
about
automatic soundboard. Yeah. I mean, Berlin is an
Spread a
amazing
little
city.
love.
There we go. There we go. And now Jared did mention that you can check out our Songs of the Pod on our Twitter, Untranslatable, and also on YouTube. But I will say this, although we are not doing any Songs of the Pod today because this is a travel series, if you are trying to get into that Berlin mood and Berlin vibe, check out the German group Seed. That is SEEED. I've been listening to them for about an hour and a half, getting ready for
You
this
betcha.
podcast, and I'm sure you will enjoy it as well. And to start off our episode today, we would like to just share a brief, some brief stories of our experiences in Berlin. And I think it's best to start off with Jared's first time there, which was this spring. When did you come, Jared? February?
March.
Early
March.
And how long were we in Berlin for? Like 3 days? 2 days? 3 days?
I think so. Yeah, I got in on Saturday, and then we went to Prague on Tuesday. So yeah, I'd say about 3 days. And definitely, it was a great time, but we had plenty more we could have done there. We were just getting started. And, that's the thing about Berlin. I was actually doing some slight research, and I found out that Berlin is 9 times the size of Paris.
Yeah. Oh,
9
Berlin is huge.
times.
I mean, I always forget how big it is until I look at, places where I want to go and then have to map out on the U-Bahn or the tram, how far it takes, especially if you go from east to west. And yeah, the sheer size of Berlin is huge. I think Jared and I, while we were there, we eavesdropped onto a tour group near the Berliner Dom, which is a beautiful place you definitely need to check out. And we'll talk about other places to see in a bit. But, and I believe they mentioned there were more museums in Berlin than there are churches. And I think she said somewhere in the 200 range. Is that right, Jared?
That's wrong.
That's
what
wrong.
she said was there are more museums than there are rainy days.
There we go.
And
there we go.
I have the stat actually written down. I found it online. There are an impressive 180 museums in Berlin, and on average 106 rainy days a year. That was the stat that she was saying.
So there you go. So you can go to the museums in Berlin on your rainy days and your sunny days. And the museums in Berlin alone are absolutely fantastic. And one of the most beautiful spots in Berlin as well is called the Museumsinsel or Museum Island, which is a great place to go. And I first ran across the Museumsinsel when I was there, actually with a group of study abroad students from Michigan State in 2015. And I have to say, these two study abroad groups, I went in 2015 and 2016 during the summer, and we ended each study abroad group in Berlin. And it was such a great place to end the study abroad experience, especially when Berlin is such it's just a thriving city. There's so much to do, so much to see. Jared and I were there for 3 days, and we had 3 jam-packed days. We even had really shitty weather while we were there. It was raining most of the time. It was cold.
Did not slow us down.
It did not, but that's
we just walked through the rain.
Exactly, and that's the crazy thing about Berlin, which leads me to the first thing we'd like to discuss, which is how long should you stay? And I'm just going to go out there and say, if you have the time and the money, and Berlin isn't actually that expensive, I would suggest staying there a week, at least a week. Ideally, have a weekend in there as well, so you can really experience the nightlife in Berlin, which is out of this world.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, though, what makes it easier to spend, like if you only have less time and you still want to go there like we did, it does help that there are a lot of different districts, and they all have very sort of, not all of them, but a lot of them have very different personalities. So like we were in Kreuzberg, for example, and I think that even though we did go to different areas, we could have spent our entire 3 days or 4 days just there alone.
Easily.
And so I think that the fact that there are so many districts and they all have such different personalities helps if you want to spend a little less time. Maybe focus your trip a little bit more than just trying to hit all like the main sightseeing spots or something like that.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you can't stay for a week, I would say a minimum of 3 days. I think 2 days would be way too short. You could still, you'd still have a good time. You would have a good time if you were there for 1 day. But you will just feel, I would say, maybe slightly overwhelmed or a little sad because you're missing out on so many other cool things you can see. And you can't squeeze it all in within 2 days or even 3 days. Even if you got up at the butt crack of dawn to get started, it would still be such a tight trip, and there'd be a lot of things that you could still see. So there's a lot of amazing things in Berlin, which I think should get us started with the must-see attractions. And our hope for this segment is to not only give you guys kind of the very stereotypical sites to see, but also a few kind of off the beaten path, which are always good to know about, especially if you are not a fan of seeing a bunch of tourists and just being in the crowd where all the other tourists go. The great thing about Berlin is that you can experience so much. The culinary scene there is amazing. The architecture, the art, the nightlife. I mean, the list goes on and on. But let's start off with some of the must-sees that are the quintessential Berlin. Like if you didn't see these, people would be like, were you really in Berlin? And I'll start with number 1, Jared. I think you know which one I'm going to say. It is the Brandenburg Tor or the Brandenburg Gate.
See, I actually have a specific bullet point in my notes asking, do you need to see the Brandenburg Tor? Because, it's a good question. Obviously, that's like the most Berlin of tourist attractions. But like, one, it's just always so packed there, and like it's just a big gate. Out of all the tourist attraction things we saw, not that I still wanted to see it. Let me be clear, but that seemed like the least necessary one for me to see.
Okay.
Like we just went there and we stood there for like 5 or 10 minutes. Like, all right, now let's keep moving.
Right.
Can I tell you?
Yeah. Go ahead.
My 2 top ones.
Okay.
So, yes, the Brandenburg Tor, obviously everybody who is planning on going to Berlin's probably heard of it if you've done even the slightest bit of research. My 2 favorite ones that are still, I'd say, one of them's quintessential Berlin. The other one might not be. The East Side Gallery.
Oh, for sure.
That is a must-see. And the great thing about it is, I've heard of it before I went there. What it is, it's the Berlin Wall, and a section of it has like art pieces on it. So there's like a block made for each artist to make their own little art piece, and it changed. Some of them change, some of them don't. But what I didn't realize before I went there was just how long it was.
Yeah.
I mean, we were walking forever. And so that's the good thing about it is, one, it's, a major piece of Germany history, the Berlin Wall. And so you're seeing that. But then also you're seeing, a whole bunch of crazy art. And it's endless. And you're you're active. You're not just standing there staring at something like, the Brandenburg Tor. You get there and you're looking at it. I don't mean to downplay it. It's not like it's ugly or boring or something like that. It's very nice. But the good thing about the East Side Gallery is, you're moving, you're walking, and you're seeing, you're seeing that, but you're seeing some other areas of, like, you see that the Mercedes-Benz Arena and stuff like that. So you do see other things other than just that. So I thought that was, and it's right next to, watch this, the Oberbaumbrücke.
Very good. You did your homework.
Actually, I did not look it up. I just remembered it.
Nice.
So that's a very nice view too, and so it is. I thought that was one of my favorite things I saw there, and I wanted to make sure I got to see that. And luckily, if you're in Kreuzberg like we were, it's very close.
And yes, and before you get to your second spot, Jared, I will also say this about the East Side Gallery. Number one, it's right by Warschauer Straße, which is the U-Bahn stop. Walking distance from there. Very easy to find, and it is actually the longest remaining standing part of the Berlin Wall, which is pretty cool. And if you get an appetite while you're walking along there, there's some really, really good Schnellimbiss or like quick little street food stands right under the U-Bahn. That's where Jared and I got some schnitzel there. It was fantastic schnitzel for very good price as well.
Yes. Now, I feel like you could guess, if you think about what we did while we were there, I feel like you could guess my second favorite.
Was it Treptower Park?
It was.
Okay.
That was so impressive.
And that's the Soviet Memorial.
Yes. There's Treptower Park, which is just a normal park. But if you walk within it, there's then just this massive, very impressive Soviet memorial. And it has this giant statue at one end of it. And then it almost kind of looks like... or like the Empire would hang out from Star Wars or something like that. For sure. And it's beautiful there. And I'm sure in summer it's even nicer than it was for us, where it was, early spring. So nothing was there. It was also a little, I feel like, eerier because it was gray outside. There wasn't really any color from flowers or anything. It was a very sort of bleak day visually, and I think it added to sort of the imposing nature of the memorial. And you're within a park, so it's a great place to hang if you're like trying to if you're enjoying Berlin for say a week and you're trying to get out of the hustle and bustle a bit. You can also just chill there for a bit and hang.
Oh, definitely, absolutely. Now I will say this though, Jared, about the Brandenburg Gate. The one nice thing about it is when you're in that part of Berlin, you're very close to two other very important must-see attractions, which is the Holocaust Memorial and also the Bundestag, the German Parliament building as well, the Reichstag, which is amazing. And I will say this, if you're smart and you know when you're going and you book it in advance, unfortunately, I dropped the ball on this when Jared came to visit. I did not book. You can get a tour, and I'm pretty sure it's either free or very affordable. You just have to book it in advance. They have this beautiful glass dome at the top of the building, the Parliament building. And you can see all of Berlin from up there. It's really awesome. If you don't have the time to do that, though, it's still worth seeing the building. The building's absolutely beautiful, very historic, and is definitely a must-see as well. And that is in Berlin-Mitte, which tends to be more of the touristy area in Berlin, I would say. And I would say, as Jared mentioned at the top of the show, the biggest thing if you are going to see Berlin, especially on a time crunch, check out the different Kiez or neighborhoods they have. So Kreuzberg, Neukölln, Friedrichshain, Prenzlauer Berg. There's all these different really amazing neighborhoods, and they all have their own vibe. Their own different styles of food. I know that in Kreuzberg, actually, there's a lot of really, really good cafes and coffee shops to get really high-quality coffee for a good price. Neukölln, to me, was just kind of an interesting area with all the different graffiti and things there. There's just so many cool places in Berlin that you can see. And the neighborhoods really give you an appreciation of the city as a whole, because Berlin-Mitte is really kind of the historical, classical part of Berlin, but there's so much more to Berlin than that.
Yeah. And the one good thing about Mitte, where the Brandenburg Tor is even though I said, is it necessary? The good thing about it is, yes, it's surrounded by a lot of other cool stuff, and it's a beautiful area to walk around. So even if you're not like making a point to see the Brandenburg Tor, or if you don't think it's that necessary, it's easy to at least just say you saw it and walk by it, because it is within a great area to walk around, to at least hit some tourist things if you want to do that. Which, we shit on tourist things, but we do them too. So it's not like we're totally against those things.
Right. Well, and the thing with the Brandenburg Gate as well is it's one of the most historically significant things in Berlin. It's been there since the 18th century, and this gate was actually the symbol of the separation between East and West Berlin, which is also pretty cool. And that's the thing. If you're a history buff, you have an endless amount of things to do and to see in Berlin. There's even some free things as well. Jared, do you remember we walked around? Oh, shoot. I'm trying to find the name of it right now. It's oh, shoot. What is it? Topography of Terror. Do you remember we walked by this? We walked by this. This was when we walked past Checkpoint Charlie, which is also kind of a must-see. And the Topography of Terror is where you see all these different, and it's free. It's completely outside, or at least I think a lot of it is outside. And you can see and read about the stories of people that had to deal with the separation of East and West, and people who tried to flee into the West from the East. And so this is a really great kind of budget travel tip. And Jared and I just kind of stumbled upon it, and we're walking around and checked it out. You remember?
Yeah. Now that I'm looking at it, yeah, I do. Yeah. That's another area. That's in a totally different area, isn't it? Checkpoint Charlie and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of cool to see too. That was cool to see, but specifically Checkpoint Charlie is a little cheesy with the
for sure
with how they do it. But it is a cool area to walk around as well. And that's where we went just to sit in a coffee shop for an hour just to stop moving for a hot sec.
Yeah, and we needed it. We definitely needed it. Now, if you are in Berlin on a nice day, especially in the summer or the spring or even early fall, one place I would highly suggest to visit and a must-see is the Berlin Zoo. The Berlin Zoo is gigantic. Believe it or not, they have more than 1,350 species and over 20,000 animals. And so the price is 14 euros, 14 euros and 50 cents for adults and 7 euros and 50 cents per child. So price-wise, it's not too bad. And I can tell you, I was there the summer of 2016. We spent 4 hours there. And I'm not even sure if we saw all the animals.
I couldn't tell you the last time I've been to a zoo, to be honest with you. Right?
It's awesome, though. The Berlin Zoo is pretty wild. It's really cool. And they even have some historic buildings there as well, which is really nice. It's funny. So a little kind of random little history thing. The whole reason why I ever went to Berlin was because my father studied art at the Academy of Fine Arts in Berlin. And he used to actually go to the zoo and sketch animals on his little sketch paper during the day. So whenever I talk to my father about the Berlin Zoo, he always, I can see it's bringing back the nostalgic memories of back when he was studying art in Berlin.
Oh, that's cool.
In the 60s. So yeah. And the great thing about Berlin is I think it's safe to say that there is something for everybody in Berlin.
Yes. Speaking of must-see, we haven't even gotten to, I guess part of the must-see attractions, we should probably talk about nightlife. That's a whole other aspect of of Berlin that makes it so unique. So Berlin is really optimized as far as nightlife goes for people that love going to clubs.
Yep.
It's got a huge bustling club scene.
Perfect for Jared.
Yes. And if you don't want to look like a real nerd, don't show up at 10, 11, or even 12 for that matter.
Yeah, I would say show up at 2.
Yeah. They and depending on the club, some of them just go 24 hours from Friday all the way to Monday morning or whatever.
Yep.
So you can go at any time of the day. And from what you've told me at least, and from what I've heard from some other people, the way that the way that not natives or locals go, I should say, to avoid the tourism is that they go at 6 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. There's locals usually aren't going at just your normal, quote unquote, normal club time for the most part for some of those clubs.
Yeah, I would agree.
But we did find a place that was right up my alley, and that was Hopfenreich. and that bar was amazing. It had a really cool vibe to it. It looked like, I mean, it wasn't a cave, but it looked like it was very simplistic. But it had a huge selection of beers from the tap, and it was cool. The only thing that was surprising was the number of. I don't think we ever ran into a German person working there, and we went there twice.
Right. Yeah, that was interesting. But yeah, Hopfenreich is fantastic. And another place, if you are a beer fan, and Jared and I sadly didn't make it there. I went there the night before Jared arrived to check it out, and it's called Flaschenzug, which literally means like bottle train. And Flaschenzug is cool because number one, they only had 5 different kinds of beer on tap, but they were all pretty good quality. It was called a Rotes Zwickel, which is like a special kind of beer that I've only been able to find in Germany and Austria. It's a little bit stronger. It's usually, I think, about 6 to 8%, and it's pretty good. And they also do some really interesting shots and cocktails at Flaschenzug as well. So if you're not a beer person, but you're looking for a chill evening, this is a good place to go. And Flaschenzug, I believe, is in Neukölln in Berlin, so you can check that out as well. If you are into clubbing, there are tons and tons and tons of clubs. The most famous is called Berghain. I think we were talking to Matthias about it a little bit. And, you know, Matthias, this Berliner we met while we were there, he has gone in many times, but, you know, he looks the part and he's from Berlin and he speaks German, right? I would say this, if you're a tourist and you want to go to Berghain, number one, don't wear your typical clubbing clothes. If you're a dude, do not wear a button down and a nice pair of jeans and like dress your shoes. You will never get in. If you're a girl, don't wear like a pretty dress and like some heels. You will never get in. You want to try to find the most alternative. I've heard that like if you're wearing all black, that can be good. If your jeans are ripped up, that can be even better. And if while you're waiting in line for Berghain, especially if you're a tourist and you don't speak German, don't talk in the line. I have heard that the doorman is incredibly selective and they don't like to let a ton of tourists in because it is the most popular club in Berlin. And so you ideally should try to dress alternatively, be a bit quiet. And when you get up to the bouncer, I've never been there, but I do have a friend that's gone in there before as well. And he said that basically you have to act really carefree. Like you don't care whether or not you get in. If you look super nervous, they're not going to let you in. And so basically,
I hate this.
Right?
I hate waiting in lines. I hate that selectiveness.
Right. Right. And that's the thing that's why Jared and I chose places like Hopfenreich because it's just a chill bar you can go relax in. I'm trying to think of some of the other clubs.
Berghain looks awesome though because it looks like an old
it's an old factory, I think.
Is that what it is? Because it does look
sure.
very like communisty almost. It's like a very large, just almost bare-looking, I guess, factory building.
Right.
And it does look very cool. And I can imagine how that would be a cool, like, I could imagine, I'm looking at pictures inside. And I mean, it's gigantic. Like, this place is huge. But yeah, I'm not into the whole wait. I hate the idea of waiting in lines just to potentially not even get let in.
Right.
But I hate waiting in lines in general. But this place is cool, and yes, I've heard that too. If you're a tourist, just shut up. Granted, that's a good rule for in general in Germany. If you're waiting in line, there's not a lot of talking in general in lines in Germany. But definitely don't try to be a tourist and don't try to dress like you're going to your typical club because you'll look like a real square and they won't let you in.
Right. Another good one that I've heard about there, I haven't been to, but I've been told by quite a few people who live in Berlin, is called Sisyphus. It's supposed to be also a really great club. I'm also not a huge club guy. The only one I went into years ago was called Matrix, but I've like walked by it since, and it looks like it's a bunch of, like 16 to 18-year-olds, which now the drinking age in Berlin or in Germany for beer and wine is 16. But I think usually clubs tend to be a little bit more selective with that stuff. I'm trying to find the other one. I went to this one nightclub a few years ago. I'm going to see if I can find it. I think, if I remember correctly, yes.
Riesmüller? Gretchen?
No, not those. Those are supposed to be good as well. But the one club that a friend of mine, Urta, who studies in Berlin, she recommended a place called Sage. And now the cool thing about Sage is it's an underground club, and on I believe it's either Tuesdays or Thursdays. It's a Thursday, I think. On Thursdays, it's a normal club. Every other day of the week, it's a Kit Kat club, which means it's like a swingers club. But the cool thing about Sage, and I think I've told you about this, Jared, I may have mentioned it while we were in Berlin. The cool thing about Sage is they have a few different rooms, and one of the rooms is like a top 40 hits. Another one is like a metal room, which is really cool, like having heavy metal blaring everywhere. And then also another room is like a dance, like hip hop kind of room. But what's really awesome is they have a swimming pool there. Now, I don't know how clean it is, how sanitary it is.
I don't know if I'd want to go into that swimming pool, but I do like that they have it.
Yeah, it's really cool. So check out Sage. And my one tip for anyone going into nightclubs in Berlin, especially if you're, I mean, I don't mean to sound sexist here, but this is just what I've experienced. If you're a girl, you probably won't have too many problems. If you're a guy...
Getting in, you mean?
Getting in, exactly. If you're a guy in a group of like 4 to 8 other dudes, I would actually say stand in groups of 2s and maybe even separate yourselves a little bit, just because when you're in a large group, I think they try to, keep the numbers, ratio of men to women at a certain, capacity. So just realize that. And in Berlin, it can be selective where you get in. But when I went to Sage Club, I was actually in a group of, I think, 10 people, and it was guys and girls, and they let everybody in, which was great.
But it definitely helps that you had both in there. Exactly.
And I would say a lot of the rules or kind of club culture you've learned in other countries, they go out the window when you're in Berlin. Berlin is just a different world. It's completely different. But it is such an amazing place to experience nightlife, and it's definitely worth it, without a doubt.
And there's a lot of other cool stuff to do. Like we did the stuff like the awesome karaoke bar that we went to and stuff like that. But that's the thing about Berlin, and that's why I think it's important to give yourself as much of your vacation time as you can to that, because we only had 3 days and we wanted to do a lot of stuff. And so we never probably got more than like 5 hours of sleep the entire time we were there. So if you don't want to suffer from exhaustion the entire time, give yourself some time to enjoy it.
And the karaoke bar that Jared mentioned, by the way, it is called Monster Ronson's Ichiban Karaoke, which is also on Warschauer Straße. And I think we went there on like a Tuesday night, and it was fairly empty.
Something like that.
But it was pretty cheap, and it was fun. And Jared has some funny pictures of those. You'll have to put those up. Those are great.
And even though it was pretty quiet, not quiet, but there wasn't a lot of people in there, they still do a great job of combating that, because there are a bunch. It's a big place. There are a bunch of karaoke rooms, like little individual rooms for like say 4 to 10 people depending on the room, but they close down rooms if based off of how many people are in there. So they force people to hang out together, and they force people to share rooms with strangers. So even though it is huge, it doesn't feel like that, because there might only be 4 rooms open if that's how many people it allows.
And there's going to be some mingling. So if you're single and ready to mingle, check that place out for sure. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the must-sees, because I think we've only, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Berlin. So just to recap, though, obviously the things in Mitte that are worth seeing are the Brandenburg Gate, the Holocaust Memorial, the Reichstag, or the German Parliament building.
Is that where the Museumsinsel is?
No, the Museumsinsel is in a different spot. I believe that's more on the east side of the city, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
But yeah, so the other place that is worth checking out is Alexanderplatz, and we walked by there, and that's also where the Fernsehturm is, or this like TV tower, which we didn't go up, but I've never been up there, but next time I go to Berlin, that's on my list of things to do, because I'm sure it's awesome. Also, as Jared mentioned, near Warschauer Straße, check out the East Side Gallery. Also, the Berliner Dom, which is the Berlin Cathedral, is absolutely amazing. And this is right on the museum island. So, so you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone here by checking out the Berliner Dom and also checking out the Museumsinsel. One of the most famous museums at the Museumsinsel is called the Pergamon Museum. Then they also have the Bodum Museum, which is sculptures in Byzantine and antique art. Then you have the Neues Museum, which they have ancient Egyptian art. You have the Altes Museum, or Old Museum, which has Greek, Etruscan, and Roman art. And then also the Alte Nationalgalerie, which is a national art gallery with neoclassical, romantic, impressionist, and early modernist artwork. So, and that's only a few museums. I'm pretty sure there are also other museums at the Museumsinselguide as well.
Those are all within walking distance of each other.
Exactly. I mean, you could set out 2 days of just checking out the museums at the Museumsinsel. No problem whatsoever. That's for sure. And the other thing I would suggest is get a pass for public transportation and skip the cheesy touristy bus tours. Jared and I almost did one while we were there because it was rainy and our legs were exhausted from all the walking we did. But I would say we didn't do it. But I would say that if you get public transportation passes while you're there, which aren't too expensive,
€7 for a day ticket,
right? Which is not bad at all if you use it. And we were using them all over the place, and it's a great way to see the city for sure. Absolutely. I'm trying to think of other things to see as well. Oh yeah, so one place Jared and I unfortunately didn't make it to, but is on my list for next time is called Teufelsberg, or Devil's Mountain, which apparently used to be this old kind of spy area on the top of this hill, kind of on the outskirts of Berlin. And that's also worth seeing. Also, there are tons and tons and tons of flea markets in Berlin, especially on Sunday at Mauerpark. So check that out for vintage clothing, shoes, bags, jewelry, furniture, bikes, vinyl records. Pretty much anything you can think of, you can probably find at a flea market in Berlin. There's a lot of cool stuff there as well. So yeah, there's tons to see, tons to do. If you're a history buff, definitely check out, some of the different museums they have there. They have, for example, the DDR Museum, which is the museum about East Berlin under communist rule. There's a Stasi Museum, which is about the secret police. And then just the architecture and buildings that are also historic as well. You have the Memorial Church, or Gedächtniskirche. That's a tough one in German to say. What were your impressions on that one, Jared? The Gedächtniskirche.
I don't even remember that memorial.
That was the one with the roof that was gone. Remember?
Oh, yes. I thought that was very cool. I mean, it was different in the sense that I've seen plenty of old European churches, and seeing this one after it had been bombed during World War II, was it?
Yep.
I enjoyed the perspective, and I enjoyed that they left it that way. And then also right next to it is like almost the complete opposite of it, because it's like a highly modern just box kind of thing that they made. Right. But I thought that was really cool. We did not get to go in. We missed it literally by like 3 minutes. Remember that?
Yep.
Just because we went into the newer church first.
Exactly.
Then we came out and we're like, oh, it's closed now.
Yep.
But you said you can go up it, can't you?
I think
okay.
You can. I'm not 100% on that, but yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was cool, and it's a little eerie to see it like that too.
Right, and they left it like that on purpose, as a reminder of what can happen. So this church was built in the late 19th century by Kaiser Wilhelm II, and obviously this church suffered significant damage during World War II. After the war, a new church was constructed. And retained the damaged spire. The church is now a memorial to peace and reconciliation. And so this is a very, very popular place that a lot of people go to. And the cool thing about this church is right by Kurfürstendamm, which I would say now is a bit overrated, but it is the biggest shopping street in Berlin. I would say if you're a budget shopper, go check out the flea markets and check out other shops outside of Mitte and Kurfürstendamm. You'll find much better deals. However, on Kurfürstendamm, depending on when you go there, you may be able to find some really good deals. I got a soccer jersey for half off a few summers ago there. So you just have to pick and find the right deals. But what's really cool on the Kurfürstendamm is what they call the KaDeWe, or Kaufhaus des Westens, or like shopping mall of the West, which is cool. One, because they have all these crazy fancy designer stores, but also if you go all the way up to the top floor, there's a huge kind of food court there and a really nice view of the city as well.
I had fun walking through there and playing Guess How Much This Cost with Chad.
Yeah, that was crazy. There was so many crazy expensive things. And as we mentioned as well, the Soviet Memorial in Treptower Park is definitely worth seeing as well. So we don't want to overwhelm you with sights to see, and there are plenty more sights to see. But now I think it's time to discuss what to watch out for and what to avoid. So I will say this, at least my experience with Berlin, and I've been there 5 times, I've never had any problems or issues. I find the city to be very, very safe. Yes, you will see homeless people. Yes, you will see beggars. Yes, you may even see some drug users in some places. But generally speaking, it's very safe. And interestingly enough, the places with the highest amount of petty crime tend to be the very touristy areas like Mitte, which I guess goes without saying. And because there's not a ton of things to watch out for, I have a couple kind of ironic things for you to watch out for or to avoid while you're in Berlin. Yeah,
one,
go for
though,
it. Go for it.
Is that you might get, especially if you're appear to be a tourist, you might get solicited a lot for drugs. But literally, if you just ignore them, then they don't care.
Right. Yeah. Just
so
keep walking.
Don't get nervous or anything. They literally don't care. It's just they solicit a bunch of touristy-looking people for if they want drugs and stuff.
For
sure. You
sure.
just keep walking and you're fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We never had any problems with anyone trying to chase us or you know.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Now I will start with a few serious what to avoids. I would avoid giving money to any beggars on the street because a lot of them they work for someone else and these people won't even get the money that you give them. So that's the first thing I would say you should avoid. You may see some people who are either they might be legitimately injured or it may be an act. It really depends. But a lot of these people will try to really, tug on your heartstrings and get you to give them money. So I would avoid that.
You need to take that tip yourself, by the way.
I have been. I was
going to say at East Side Gallery when you almost, were you...
that's true. We did. Oh, I did get got at East
Don't
Side.
say we, by the way.
Yeah, I totally did. I got. That's right. We were walking by, and I think I told Jared I got by similar people like 2 or 3 summers before that. So clearly, I guess I don't learn. But don't do that. So people learn from my mistakes.
Learn from Chad's mistakes.
Don't do that. What happened at East Side Gallery? I'm glad you mentioned that, Jared. I forgot about this.
Yeah.
What happened at East Side Gallery is we were walking, and they stopped us. What did they even ask us? They asked us
Asking us to sign some sort of petition-looking thing.
Exactly. They asked us to sign a petition. I stupidly signed it, and then they were like, well, now you need to make a donation. I gave them 1 or 2 euros, and they were like, it needs to be 5 euros. And I was like, nope, that's all you're getting. So be careful of those people. They'll be walking around with, and obviously if you're at East Side Gallery, you're probably gawking at the beautiful artwork, as you should be. But you will also obviously be a tourist. So just be careful of those people. All right, but now a couple funny things to avoid while in Berlin. Number 1, avoid Kurfürstendamm. During the daytime, you might get run over by a luxury car like a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW. Your pockets may be cleaned out at the Apple Store or at one of the luxury boutique shops in the KaDeWe. Avoid Hackischer Markt. On the weekends, the stampeding tourist hordes are known to cross the entire area without looking left or right. Obviously, you really want to avoid any local food at the pubs and the different neighborhoods because you'll have too much fun drinking, you'll probably stay too long, and you'll either eat too much food or drink too much beer. So be very careful of those. I hope you all can hear my sarcasm through the speakers right now. But yeah, and so Berlin is a very, very safe place. Really, the worst that might happen to you is maybe you would get pickpocketed, but I would say that's if you're really being obvious and not careful. So yeah, another thing to avoid, though, while you're in Berlin is if you're in Berlin and you're like, oh, I'm in Germany, I'm going to wear my lederhosen or my dirndl, my traditional German clothing. Do not wear that in Berlin. People will laugh at you. They will look at you. You will stick out like a sore thumb. And that's definitely not really a cool thing to do in Berlin for sure. Other than that, though, I mean, the great thing about Berlin is I feel like you can really be yourself.
Yes. Yeah. They do seem to take that very seriously as individualism and sort of standing out seems to be which is different than what you would think about most of Germany in general, but it really seems to be a positive in Berlin.
Oh, definitely. And then a couple other things too, though. I would say you want to avoid only focusing on the sites. I would say focus not only on the sites, but the neighborhoods, which we've mentioned as well. I'm going to keep repeating this because it's so important when you go to Berlin to really get a good feel of the city. The second thing you should avoid is depending on paying by credit card in places. I would say keep cash, keep euros on hand while you're in Berlin. A lot of places still don't accept credit card. And so it's always smart to have cash on you, and don't bank on there being an ATM on every corner either. So be smart about it. Get out enough money so if you're in a pinch, you always have 5 to 10 euros extra in case you need something. Also, if you need to go to the bathroom somewhere, usually it will cost you anywhere from 50 cents to €1. So keep those coins on you as well. That's very, very important as well. And another thing I would say is avoid only checking out the concrete jungle. Enjoy the parks. Enjoy some of the beautiful nature. Victoria Park has a beautiful waterfall as well, which is great. And another thing I would say is avoid only eating traditional German food. Yes, you have to try currywurst when you're in Berlin. That goes without saying. But I've had some of the best Turkish food in Berlin, Mediterranean food, Thai food. There is amazing food from all over the place in Berlin. So check those different foods out. There's a lot of interesting fusion restaurants as well. So you definitely will not go hungry in Berlin either.
I agree with you. Some budget tips. I would say that Berlin has, at least from what I remember researching, a lot of great hostels to choose from. And we stayed in one that was cool. The only thing, not that I didn't like about it, I'm not a huge fan of like communal bathrooms, but the actual room was a great size and nice. Much like the one that we stayed in Prague, if we were there, more on at a better timing, there's usually a lot of activities and stuff going on and great ways to like meet other tourists and hang out with other people there. So if you're traveling alone, maybe that's another thing to consider. I don't know much about the hotels, to be honest with you, but I think if you're looking for a way to save money, you're not going to be disappointed if you just do even the slightest bit of hostel research.
Definitely. Yeah, I would suggest hostels in Kreuzberg, Neukölln, and also Friedrichshain. I've stayed in those 3 places, and they've all been fantastic. And the access to public transportation is great. As I mentioned earlier on this episode, I would suggest not getting like one of those hop-on, hop-off bus tours, but just get a day pass or a weekend pass for the public transportation there and take that instead. That will be cheaper and be much more useful for you than taking like a travel bus tour around the city as well. And some other budget tips as well. Try different street foods there. It's usually very affordable. Even a lot of restaurants, once you leave, I would say if you leave Berlin Mitte, where a lot of the tourists tend to congregate, you can find great deals on food at a lot of different places. I ate at a really good Indian restaurant in Kreuzberg for lunch before Jared got in. And I think my meal, I had a beer, chicken curry, and rice, and I think also some naan bread for, I think, like 8 or 9 euros, which was not bad.
Amber went to that Thai restaurant with your friend, and that was surprisingly affordable. I can't remember where was that again?
Friedrichshain, I think.
Okay. And that was very affordable, and it was delicious too. And if you just stay out of sort of the touristy areas, it's easy to find delicious and affordable food.
Absolutely. And the last budget tip I would give all of you listening out there is to just do a lot of things outside. If you're there when the weather's nice, there's a lot of really great, parks. East Side Gallery is completely free. There are even some museums that are also free, so look into those as well. Berlin can be a great place to travel on a budget. I would say if you're staying at a hostel and you were trying to budget for a trip for a week and you were staying at a hostel, if you're willing to sleep in a bed in a dormitory, I would say your cost of living plus with food for a week, I bet you could rough it for around 200 euros for 1 week.
Yeah.
I would say. Maybe less.
I'd believe that. I'd believe that.
Absolutely. And obviously, as we mentioned, just a few places to stay. I would not suggest staying in Berlin Mitte. That's where a lot of the tourists are. It can be very expensive. Also, I would not suggest staying in Charlottenburg, which is a beautiful neighborhood, but it's one of the more wealthier neighborhoods in Berlin. I would suggest Kreuzberg, Friedrichshain, or Neukölln as a place to stay. And as Jared mentioned, check out the hostels. There's a lot of great ones in Berlin. We stayed in a hostel that was a 2-bedroom, communal shower, and what did we even pay per night?
2 beds. It's not 2 bedrooms.
2 beds. Yeah, communal showers, but how much was it? It wasn't very much.
No, I feel like I ended up paying you maybe 80 or 100 euro because you paid for it, then I paid you back later.
Yeah, so I think it was around 160 euros. I think that's right. So, and we were there for what?
3 nights.
3 nights, which is not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really not bad at all. So those are our travel tips for Berlin. We wish we could have gone into more of them, but I think you guys need to just go out and experience it for yourselves. Don't be afraid to be adventurous and explore in Berlin, especially all of the different neighborhoods. There's a ton of great places to see and things to do. So we hope this episode has inspired you to either travel to Berlin or given you a few useful resources for your next trip there. We really hope you enjoy. Let us know what you did and what you thought of Berlin at untranslatablepodcast@gmail.com. You could also slide into Jared's DMs on Twitter and let him know about Berlin, Untranslatable1. Also check out our Instagram for pictures of Berlin and all sorts of other places as well. And please do not forget 5-star reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. Give us some feedback on what you would like us to cover and what we can do to better improve this podcast for all of you. Because although we do love it for ourselves, we also are doing this for you. So let us know. We would really appreciate it. As they say in Berlin, Dankeschön. And as we say here at the Untranslatable Podcast, bon voyage, děkujeme a muchas gracias.